On today's show, how about that Usher halftime show? Just kidding, we're talking about the latest Padres news and notes, including their interest in talking with the Red Sox, Hyun-jin Ryu, Michael Lorenzen and Noah Syndergaard, their need for a lefty, an ode to Peter Seidler, and some of your YouTube comments on Trevor Bauer, Ha-Sung Kim, and a whole lot more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, February 12th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or at LO_Padres for only Padres stuff, if that floats your boat more, but follow both. I'd appreciate that. Guess what? My brain likes seeing the numbers go up. What can I say? I'm only human. And then also check out Locked On Padres on YouTube to see whatever fit I'm rocking. No special Padres jacket today, although I will bring it back soon. I want to choose a day with a segment. I think I might actually do it next Monday and make it the Monday jacket from now on. We'll think about it. A dress code and whatnot for the Locked On Padres podcast. Go check that out, Locked On Padres on YouTube. Today's episode, guys, is going to be a little bit different. I've decided that I think it would be helpful to have a more weekly recurring segment that makes sense. That's something that you can expect, right? Because sometimes I think I do try to tease out what's in the mood, what's on the horizon, I should say, for the show. I want to make it like there's at least one day you know what you're going to get, and it's going to be Monday. And Monday is going to be the day that we kind of just go over some of the latest news and reports, little anecdotes and whatnot that I've gleaned from the press, from other reports, from maybe even occasionally stuff that I've heard, as well as looking at some comments or questions. So that's for you guys, listeners and viewers. Go send me questions. Go comment stuff on YouTube. Please do that. And I may respond to it on the Monday show. And that should be a lot of fun, whether it be a question or even a troll comment or just someone sending a meme. Maybe if you put an emoji, you might get featured. I don't know. You can maybe if you ask me a question about pop culture, you might even be featured. Who knows? Because it's a long off season. I want to feature you guys, the listeners, my lovely listeners and viewers, as much as possible, because that's what we do out here. So Padres news and notes on Monday. Going forward, that will be the segment. Today's episode, guys, though, is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's right. Don't say I never did anything for you. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And let's get started with the Padres news and notes. Let's do it. Okay. First thing, I was reading a lot from The Athletic this weekend, and basically a lot of the latest Padres news and notes, I promise I'll stop saying that phrase too many times, basically revolves around some topics that we've broached in the last week or so, being, what is still left to happen, right? How many moves are they still left to make? Because the Padres, very famously, don't exactly have the most, the most budget to work with in the world. Compared to past years, I think, and that they've been really quiet. Yes, they've acquired Yuki Matsui, and yes, they made the big Juan Soto trade, but that's the thing, is when you look at overall the moves they've made this offseason, it's just strikingly low compared to what they've done in previous years. I think that the only one that comes close is the season following 2021, this offseason in which I think that their biggest additions were, I think, like Robert Suarez and Nick Martinez, if I'm not mistaken. Those were kind of like the biggest offseason additions they made, and then they made Luke Voit, I think, 3 weeks before opening day, it felt like, right? So they've had slow off seasons before, but it's definitely in the minority of outcomes when it comes to their action, right? Whether it be trade deadline or off season. So that's what it feels like, and I think a lot of people are frustrated, and we'll get into that later. Definitely some comments that I was left, but one report that was talked about is the Red Sox were apparently a trade partner that the Padres have discussed. This was coming from The Athletic. And when you look at that team, there's not necessarily a lot of players that I see being moved that make sense for the Padres. You look at someone like Masataka Yoshida, who is a really, interesting player, I guess is the way to say it. He started off hot for over the course of the season, but he went a little bit month by month. If you actually look at his splits, which I'm looking at now, WRC plus towards the end of the season was really rough. He started with a 136 in the first half, and then second half was 73. I'm bringing up only WRC plus because this is one of the worst qualified defenders in baseball, Masataka Yoshida. So he currently, let me see, as of last year, he was -4 in defensive runs saved and -8 outs above average. So he was really poor defensively. Some of my Red Sox fans are like, this is a really rough thing because we're like, this guy can hit. He had a 109 WRC plus for the total of the season, but as I mentioned, first half was pretty good. He's a player that might make sense, but the defense stinks, and I just don't think they're going to give up on him just yet. And I feel like that would be a desperation play by the Padres unless they think they can fix him in the outfield for whatever reason. He primarily played, let me just make sure I got this right. He mostly played left field, and I doubt that would be better in center, his defensive stuff. So otherwise, I look at this team and I say, is it, someone like Chris Martin? Is it Garrett Whitlock? Is it Kenley Jansen? Some relief help? Otherwise, I don't see the full match here because the Red Sox are kind of rebuilding, so I don't know exactly. We'd probably have to give up a lot in order to get some of these players. Tyler O'Neill, I think, would have been an awesome addition for the Padres, I will say. But the Red Sox just traded for him. I think they believe in some of his upside. They believe that 2021 season that he had, 5.5 F4, that they might be able to glean at least something from that. But they already traded for him, so they're not giving him up. So I don't really see a partnership there. Other notes, they've apparently expressed interest in a bunch of the guys that I've talked about in this podcast. Eric Lauer, Michael Lorenzen, Noah Syndergaard, and Hyun-jin Ryu. Hyun-jin Ryu is someone that I haven't really talked about among free agents and whatnot. But to go over those guys, I mean, honestly, it's kind of pick 'em. I won't hate anyone who, if you comment on this video, you're like, we should go after Syndergaard or Lorenzen or whatever. I won't hate any of them. They're not exciting, but Eric Lauer has flirted with strikeout potential before. Granted, if the Brewers can't figure him out necessarily, I don't know. And it'd be actually kind of funny if they brought in Eric Lauer, given all the trades that they had made, just like a reunion, the offseason of reunions. You bring back Patino and you bring back Eric Lauer. Lorenzen, as I've mentioned, I don't think that he's a high upside guy at all, but I do think that he's proven that he can at least throw innings. And I like that he's actually made some mechanical changes in his pitch arsenal, which suggests there was a reason why he was good last year. I like that personally out of those three. I have those four. Syndergaard, again, I think the guy's cooked, but he's not too old, which is nice. And then you've got Niebla, and I believe someone actually left me a comment a few weeks back that was like, yeah, he's still young and maybe he's been so bad that he has a little bit left. I don't know. Personally, I would probably try to stay away from that because of the injury stuff. That's why I prefer some of the other guys like Lorenzen, like Eric Lauer, who at the very minimum, I feel like can just throw innings for this team, and that's going to be really important. Well, I don't trust Syndergaard to stay healthy. 6.5 ERA last year, expected ERA of 6.52. Don't get me wrong, it would be a big name to get, whatever that means at this point, but I just don't. I don't think he's got it, man. I think he lost it. I think the injuries killed him. And it stinks because he was so dominant when he was healthy. Ryu is very interesting. He's going to be 37 this year, though. 3.46 ERA last season. And he's also been a problem with innings as of late. But could they have a role for him? I don't know. And one thing I will say is to kind of go against what I've already been saying about throwing innings and injury risk. The Padres do have decent depth now after following the Juan Soto trade and with their farm system. Maybe it won't kill them to take if they like a pitcher that maybe I don't like and it's because of injury stuff, maybe because of their depth, you're willing to take a little bit more of a risk there and say, well, we have Randy Vasquez or Johnny Brito that we can test out there. Then we've got our three prospects in Snelling, Thorpe, and Lesko. Worst case scenario, we have some reinforcements if this doesn't work. And it's a fifth spot. So, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. I'm being scared over the injury risk potential. But we'll have to see, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a big question for the rest of the Padres offseason. What are they going to do with that final spot? What's going to happen? Who stands out the most? But if it's going to be a free agent, they have a $165 million payroll right now. They're expected around 200. They can certainly add someone. We'll just have to see. We'll just have to see, though. And I hope they do, because I don't want it that they were just telling us 200 million so people didn't freak out, and then they're actually going to slowly start rolling back. I don't think that'll happen, but still, it's worth keeping an eye on. And speaking of things to keep an eye on, ladies and gentlemen, I need to tell you once again about FanDuel. How about that transition? That was pretty good, right? FanDuel, ladies and gentlemen, get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Some might even call it a bit, but it's a bet. Ladies and gentlemen, that's $150 if your bet wins. And look, the Super Bowl is over now. I told y'all to go McCaffrey or Pacheco, and I was a little bit wrong on that one. But if you did McCaffrey and if you did the over on the yards, then I was right about that. I said either one of them. Pick your poison, right? Like when it came to that. But now, guys, that football's over. It's all about the hoops action, ladies and gentlemen. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You want to bet on the Knicks? I mean, they're kind of the team lately. Everyone loves how fun the Knicks are and actually good for once, making smart moves. And Jalen Brunson hive, especially here on the East Coast, is crazy right now. My friend who like is super cynical about the Knicks, super excited. My dad, who practically quit basketball because of the Knicks, we're making him so sad. Even he's in. So now's the time, guys. Go check out the available options over at FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot always. Whether it be in this or in life, shoot your shot. Go text that girl that you like. Why not? Shoot your shot. But be respectful, of course. And go, I don't know, buy a cool sounding food that you haven't tried before and you're worried it might be bad. Give it a shot. Why not? You know? Do that. Anyway, guys, again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. Official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Just like that, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, talking over some of the latest news and updates about the Padres that I have seen lately. Just talked about some of the interest in some of those starting pitchers. Hey, I think there's going to be another move. We'll have to see. But one thing I thought was interesting that AJ Preller did mention in recent comments with Dennis Lynn to The Athletic that, you know, when it came to this past weekend, that he was like, look, like, they could very well just enter training camp and be like, there's no more major league addition to the team, right? I still think that this is one of those off seasons that's just really slow, because I feel like a lot of teams have said that, and a lot of teams with like a low payroll have said that, and there's still like, again, Cody Bellinger and Blake Snell are just hanging out. You know what I mean? Jordan Montgomery, World Series playoff hero, is just hanging out right now. Like, it's really weird that baseball works like this. And I will always understand how people are frustrated by it, because I am too. Meanwhile, the NFL and NBA, like, as soon as free agency starts, you get all the big deals. You know what I mean? It's just weird that it works like this. So, yeah, we'll have to see. And I think that a big thing with the Padres is going to be spring training. Like, this is, for me personally, the most excited I've been about catchers and spring training updates in a long time. Because typically this is a team that is making trades for big players at the major league level, right? It's usually not necessarily a team. Yeah, there's usually like a couple guys, your Jackson Merrills, your, let's say back in the day, Mackenzie Gore and CJ Abrams and whatnot. But soon they're all getting moved around so fast that I've never had to really care about that. But given the Padres, how much they lost this offseason in their rotation and their bullpen and their position players, etc., it makes me really curious about guys like Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, and will Drew Thorpe somehow make the opening day roster? I'm really excited about that. So definitely going to be keeping an eye out on that all the time. I imagine spring training camp updates, all that stuff is going to be something we frequently circle back to here on the Padres News and Notes Monday section of the podcast. Another thing that was discussed that I saw is Padres really need a lefty. Jake Cronenworth is kind of like the only lefty on the roster, at least in the starting lineup for the Padres at the moment. And that's not great, but I think that portends of a lefty being signed. So you have to go out and look at who are some lefties when it comes to the outfield, especially, that makes sense for this team. Because they need to diversify their lineup a little bit. As someone who is critiqued, and if anyone follows baseball in like a large, the mainstream way, the Yankees are a good example of a team that has been just raked into oblivion for having their lineup consist of like entirely lefties, right? Like there's only like one righty on their team, and people go nuts over that because they're like, okay, we get that you're gearing towards the short porch in Yankee Stadium, but you should also like have a little bit more lineup diversity. So that's a little bit of a problem. They do have some like bench players and whatnot that might be there. I guess Brett Sullivan, if he ever catches again for this team, he's the third catcher behind Cal Higashioka and Luis Campuzano. And then you've got Tucupita Marcano, or at least you had Tucupita Marcano, I should say. But other than that, it's like, that's it. in terms of lefties, it's basically just Jake Cronenworth. So if there's going to be an addition, I think it'll be a lefty. And one of them that I haven't talked about a lot, who has been rumored a little bit too. We discussed last week how the Brewers could be a trade partner for the Padres because of their glut of outfielders. Garrett Mitchell of the Brewers. I know, not that exciting of a name, 0.4 F4 last year, but that was in just 19 games. He's super young. WRC plus of 103, 246, 315, 446 slugging. If the Brewers are selling, you could do worse here, man. He's 24 years old. I don't know if he's like a high caliber prospect, but he's fast and it plays well with his defense. So again, defensive runs saved. If you just look at last year, granted in smaller-ish sample sizes, 3 defensive runs saved, 1 out above average. If the Brewers are selling, I'd be interested in Garrett Mitchell. I think he can make a lot of sense, and he is a lefty. So that's a name to keep an eye on, although I don't know exactly what I can't get an idea of what the Brewers are looking for right now. Because they add Rhys Hoskins, and they have some really interesting players on that team still, but then they traded Corbin Burns. So I just don't fully understand what's going on there. But we'll have to see. So Garrett Mitchell, one to keep an eye on for sure. Last thing I want to talk about really quickly when it comes to the news and notes parts of this is a nice little ode to our guy Peter Seidler. R.I.P., of course. Heart-shaped PS patch is going to be worn by Padres players on their uniforms in 2024, and they'll be available to fans at March 23rd celebration of life for Seidler. That's really cool. This is just like, every now and then we get cynical on this podcast, you know what I mean? And we get very, blinders, like let's talk sports, like we're not here to talk about all the other stuff necessarily. I try to do that, but even still, that's what you come to for this podcast, is the latest news on the Padres and whatnot. And I like stuff like this. This is really nice. I've already discussed Seidler at length. I recommend everyone go check out my episode on it after it was announced that he passed. I actually forgot, and I feel really bad. I don't think I spent a lot of time discussing him as part of when I did the episode about a month or so ago about the worst things to happen to the Padres in 2023. And I mentioned a bunch of different things, from Manny being a solo home run guy and not hitting with runners on, Bogarts, the Josh Hader incident, all that stuff. But to me, Peter Seidler is like, was even bigger, because that's just like, we can discuss ownership and the logistics of ownership of all sports and sports owners, but the guy came in and made the Padres, who were historically irrelevant almost everywhere you looked. Yes, I know they had Trevor Hoffman and Tony Gwynn, and even players like Adrian Gonzalez, players like that over time period. Goose Gossage was a Padre, right? Like some big names, don't get me wrong, but mostly an irrelevant franchise. And ever since he took over, number one thing is he clearly cared about winning and elevated the team to a sense of relevancy that they had never seen before, to the point where me taking the podcast looks like absolutely like one of the best decisions I made, because all of a sudden they are one of the premier interesting teams to talk about in baseball, which is wild. They were irrelevant, right? Like, there are teams better than them right now that aren't talked about nearly as much as them, right? Like, you got your Milwaukee last year, right? You have your Diamondbacks who made the World Series. People still talk about the Padres more, and that's, I think, a lot of that is owed to Seidler and company. So RIP, of course. I think this is a really nice gesture, and I'm excited to see it. I think it's really nice. So P.S. Love you, Peter. Thanks for making the Padres very cool. But ladies and gentlemen, that's not all. That's not all for this episode. No. Now we get to have some fun discussing some of the YouTube comments I got and how they actually relate to Padres news, right? So that's what's interesting, is that they're pretty relevant, all right? And we're going to talk about that in just a second, guys. But before we get into that, before we wind down the old show, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about our friends over at eBay. Oh, that's right. We love eBay, ladies and gentlemen. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, man, they got you covered. It's great. And personally, I'm not a big car guy. Like, I don't know much about them, and eBay Motors makes it a lot easier. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Check that out. And they have like a really cool system where they'll show you, like, does this work with your vehicle? You have to just, tell them what your vehicle is, and then they'll be able to, because it can be really complicated. And eBay Motors makes it easy for you. You're burning rubber, folks. That's what you're doing at eBay Motors. Not cash. We don't want to burn cash. In this economy, come on, we don't want to do that. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the Fernando Tatis level MVP it deserves. You know what I'm saying? Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Go check it out. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we were in the waning moments of this fun-filled episode of Padres news updates. Really cool, right? This is fun. Let's talk about some of the comments that I got. Because the comments that I got, mostly, I think you guys are really nice often. I really do. But I want to respond to some of the comments I got about the Ha-Seong Kim video I did, talking about why I think the Padres need to trade him. I also put the article over on Just Baseball, which go check that out. I forgot to mention that at the top of the episode. Go check out Just Baseball. I wrote about it. Let's read some of the comments that I got. The first one from Rico Baker 470. This is on the Ha-Seong Kim YouTube video. This is the difference between fans and front office personnel. Fans view everything in perspective of what is best from a roster standpoint. Front office has to balance what's best for the team under what's best from a business standpoint. There is 0% chance that the Padres will trade Ha-Seong Kim because they begin the season in Korea. This entire idea is irrelevant because this isn't MLB The Show. Business easily surpasses the best roster construction in this situation. I think the idea that the Padres are going to play games in Korea, which means that they just can't trade Ha-Seong Kim, is a little bit ill thought, personally. I just think that you're not going to sacrifice your season because of the really great optics and fun moments and all the business stuff you can do with Ha-Seong Kim for a series there. I just don't see it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I do agree with your standpoint, which is like, yeah, this is a business sometimes. And I think that is really relevant, not necessarily to the Padres with Kim, but in general, like when you see, let's say, Angels are a great example, right? They just lost Shohei Ohtani. Like, shouldn't you also be trading Mike Trout? Maybe part of that is like, well, we have to have some reason that people come to the ballpark. I bet that there's plenty of players like that and plenty of situations like that. The White Sox, I imagine. The White Sox haven't traded Luis Robert and Dylan Cease, despite the fact that they have no farm and they're one of the worst teams in baseball. And those two are superstars. You'd think, well, obviously they should trade them. Maybe part of it is White Sox ownership's like, well, we have to have some reason for people to come here. And if they want to see Luis Robert, they want to see Dylan Cease, we got to at least stay relevant a little bit. That's true. I do think that there is a business standpoint to all of this that is definitely worth talking about, But I also think another business standpoint of it is Padres keep winning, that'd be great. And if you keep the fans happy, that'd be great. They broke their record for most fan attendance last year. They had to sell it like every other day. It was amazing. And if you make the team good, those fans will come because we love you, Padres fans. You guys are awesome. Let's move on to another comment I got, though. Also about Ha-Seong Kim. Kim plays 3 infield positions with gold caliber. This one coming from Garrett Boyer, 458. Another Garrett. Garrett Mitchell? Coincidence? I think not. Kim plays 3 infield positions with gold glove caliber defense and has hit above average for the last 2 years. How is any of that easy to replace? Players like Kim are the hardest to replace. I just don't get this take. What about the ability to play multiple positions makes a player more replaceable? Also, Lamont Wade Jr. is a fine player, but not even close to being good enough to be the centerpiece in a Kim trade. You can trade Cronenworth. It's called a salary dump. Teams don't like to do it because of the optics, but you can throw in some prospects and get some team to take on his contract. So, number one, about the utility player thing. Totally fair question. I totally get you. First of all, Lamont Wade Jr., I appreciate you giving me some props about that of him being a pretty good player. I did not say that Lamont Wade Jr. in my episode would be the only player I want in a return. Perhaps even it becomes a 3-way somehow. They get another player from another team, then Lamont Wade, Giants get Kim, this team gets that, whatever. Totally could be possible. And also, there's some other prospects that the Giants have that I think could be interesting. Maybe you get a reliever. Maybe you get a starting pitcher. Maybe not the caliber of their Kyle Harrison top of their pitching chart, but maybe you get another player there. I think the Giants would be more than welcome to that idea. When it comes to utility players, it's just that I think that defense personally is not something that you can always invest in. I think that Major League Baseball is something that has shown that if you hit for a lot of power, if you hit for a lot of home runs, that's what drives your price up, because that's not as rare of a skill set. You can find players that play good defense. I'm not saying you can find them as good as Ha-Seong Kim when he's an above average hitter. But that's the thing. If he isn't an above average player, how much exactly do you want to give this guy out? That's just how the market tends to work. And with Ha-Seong Kim, let's say Andrew Velazquez. That guy can't hit worth anything. Really good defender, though. I just think that you tend to see that utility players, you can find the wins above replacement for them a lot easier than you can find guys that hit you 30 home runs. That's just in my experience. But again, it's a totally fair question from my guy Garrett here. Totally fair question and thing to point out, because I think that Kim is going to be awesome this year, or at least I hope he's going to be awesome, and he's an awesome player and we love him so much. But I do think the idea, I think you can find utility players that can do that. I don't think you can find outfielders who hit 25 home runs and play average defense. I just don't think you can find that. You can find guys like Ha-Seong Kim a little bit easier than that, and I think that's why the market ends up going that way. And for the second part of your thing, you can trade Cronenworth. It's called the salary dump. This is one of the things I brought up in my podcast, which is that this idea of just trade Cronenworth, it's like, cool, to who? Who is going to take on a player who's going to be being paid for 7 more years? Don't get me wrong. I think that there are other teams that could be, because they would say, you know what? We know that if he played second, he could be a lot better. But also, this is a player that has gone down every year in his metrics. Don't get me wrong. I still think you could get something out of him for sure if you moved him back to second and be a better hitter. But this is a player whose metrics, when it comes to hard hit rate, when it comes to expected batting average, when it comes to barrel rate, almost everything has gone down every single year since his debut in 2020, including in 2021. Now, he was great in 2021, but then the year after he suffered. And then the year after he got even worse. So you're looking at a player that has only shown on the, the exterior level, at least, has only gone down in a lot of areas. So you have that, and then he's a guy that you extended for 7 more years. And this is baseball, baby. People are cheap, and they don't want to necessarily pay a guy this much money for all these years. What if he's just like a 1.5 win player? It's not inconceivable that Jake Cronenworth might have been found out, and even if you move him back to center, he won't be great. And another thing that I pointed out is this is the same line of thinking with Hosmer, right? With Hosmer, everyone was like, just dump him. Just dump him. Give up prospects to do that. And guess what happened? You ended up doing that eventually, but it was part of the Juan Soto trade. So that's like a pipe dream that you're going to trick a team into taking this guy. While instead, if you trade Ha-Seong Kim, you at least, let's try to salvage Jake Cronenworth. He's not super old, at least not yet. So what if like these next 2 years, he's a 3.5 to 4 win player? If you get that plus the return from Ha-Seong Kim, that could end up giving you more wins above replacement, more overall depth. That's the point I'm trying to make. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm just saying I would rather try to salvage Cronenworth instead of just doing purely a salary dump and purely giving up assets to another team just to get him off the team. You're only losing in that situation. You know what I mean? Instead, you're just clearing it up to potentially sign another player. Maybe. I'd like that. There are some free agents at first base over the next coming years. Christian Walker, Paul Goldschmidt. Sure, but I'd rather give it a try, because if Jake Cronenworth is a 3.5 to 4 win player, that salary becomes irrelevant. We're like, cool, I'll gladly take that, And I think that that's worth a shot, especially because you might lose Kim for nothing, and that would be very bad. So that's my response to that second part of the question. Not to be mean, totally fair question, Garrett. Next up, we've got, let's see here, what do we got here? This is just a comment of a general thing. This is from Super Reviews for You. Great username. Starting pitchers they lost: Snell, Lugo, and Waka. Starting pitchers they gained: King and Brito. Relief pitchers they lost: Hader, Martinez, Barlow, Hill, and Garcia. Relief pitchers they gained: Matsui, Santos, Vasquez, and Go. In my opinion, like pretty decent return on that. Position players they lost: Soto, Sanchez, Grisham, Cooper, Nola. Position players they gained: Hickey. That's it. There's no good way to slice this situation. They have gotten worse in all 3 phases of the game, while the Dodgers and Diamondbacks have gotten much better. Yes and no. I agree and disagree with you. Super Reviews for You. On one hand, I understand what you're saying. The point I've been trying to make about the Padres is they had those players, and look where they got last year. 81 wins. Yes, I understand that they lost them, but if you replace them with decent players and you're okay, they've had worse teams than this. 2022, they had a much worse roster than 2023, and they made the postseason. Keep that in mind. Not everything is set in stone that Blake Snell will be a 5-win pitcher next year, that Josh Hader will be a 2.5-win relief pitcher next year, or that Gary Sanchez will keep up exactly what he did. Trent Grisham will keep up exactly what he did. One thing that I do think can change for this next year is luck. Batting average on balls in play, hitting with runners in scoring position. They were so bad in those areas that a regression to be to the mean should be expected, or at least to get better. And if that happens, if you don't lose every single extra inning game, if you don't lose like 80% of your one-run games, if you're just average, it's like an 85 to 86 win team. And then we're talking postseason wild card. So that's why I'm bullish on them, and that's why I still think they could be good. Because also, forget the Snell and all them, they have some unknown quantities, and sometimes that's good in some of your younger players and your prospects, like Thorpe, like King, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my thing on that, although I understand the cynicism. Last comment that we got, ladies and gentlemen, this one comes from K. Turetsky. I don't know how exactly to say that username, but sign Bauer and he could still pitch and would cost next to nothing. Trevor Bauer has been in the news a lot more lately because he posted and tweeted about how exactly what this comment says, which is that he would cost next to nothing. He's willing to pitch for nothing because there's not a lot of offers probably coming his way right now. In an effort to not get myself attacked online, I'm going to make this as short as I possibly can without getting too much on my soapbox. I think there's a couple things here. First of all, from Dennis Lin in The Athletic, when he was discussing this possibility a few weeks back, he said, look, can't rule anything out with the Padres, but I've been told this won't happen. To paraphrase basically what he said. So I could kind of leave it at that if I want to, is that that's not going to happen. Number two, I do think Trevor Bauer is a good pitcher. I think Trevor Bauer, while his Cy Young was a little Mickey Mouse just because of the fact that it was a small sample size, I still think he's an effective pitcher, and in theory would be an overqualified number 5 for basically any team in the sport, except for maybe the Dodgers, because the Dodgers are the Justice League now. So you have that. And I think he's an effective pitcher. I think he could be good. I know that he struggled sometimes out in, I think he was playing in Japan. I know that he struggled there at some point. He was like in the minors there, which was really rough for him, but then he bounced back and was, effective to a degree. The last thing I want to say on this is, how do I put this? I think everyone should be very careful to only listen to one person's side who happens to have a big platform. And that I think that this idea that there may be a blackball of Trevor Bauer, while it may be happening in the definition sense, I think you have to remember that the idea that Major League Baseball would cast this guy out for being one of the 400 guys who was really critical of them during the lockout. He just had a slightly bigger platform. Like, I think everyone was critical of baseball. Did you guys hear Blake Snell's Twitch stream during the lockout? Like, he was livid about over all this stuff. So the idea that would happen and that teams all wouldn't take him, agree to not take him, I think that there's a misunderstanding of how the sports world works. And regardless of, let's be honest, Trevor Bauer has a lot of off-field, let's say, controversies. I think the idea that if you just haven't been watching sports for a while, in my opinion, if you think that teams are scared off by that stuff, if he's a good pitcher, if he's a good player, which I do think he is. I don't think he's like a Cy Young elite player. He could definitely be very good at points, for sure. But I think the idea that, like, you're just not watching sports if you think teams are, like, afraid of that because of some off-field stuff, it's like, I don't think that. Not to mention we could get into the whole thing about, oh, well, this girl lied. And we don't have to get too much into that, but there are multiple other allegations against him. I think teams are scared that things could rile up again. And I've heard from actual players that they thought this guy could be a problem. This is a few years ago, back when he was still in the league. I don't necessarily know what they say now, but I had heard some like bad vibes about him in the sense that they wondered, like, is this the best guy to bring in on your team? And that's before some of the allegations came out. So there's that. Could he be a locker room? I don't know. That's really hard to attest to, but I did hear from some people. So it's really difficult. I think that the Padres, like I said with Dennis Lin, he said it's not going to happen. And lastly, I think it's very important to remember that's just not how sports work. Rarely do people with any sort of off-field controversy get kicked out, especially for something like what Trevor Bauer has been accused of, especially when they may be talented and help a team. teams are able to compartmentalize blinders, and I get it sometimes. People got to stay in their job, right? Like if someone's going to help them stay in their job by winning games for them, they'll do it. And I just think the idea that baseball would be this way and kick him out when it could be so easily disproven by him sharing a couple text messages, I think is a little bit short-sighted and a little bit naive, frankly. So I plan to talk about this only a little bit, and yet I talked about it a lot. Again, I think Trevor Bauer, will he be on a team? I think so. I just don't know when. I'm not quite sure when he'll be signed, and I'm not quite sure who. Probably a team that's not contending and has not too much to worry about, but I think that it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen for the Padres. I don't think they should. I don't think they should be taking risks like this right now for a team that has had plenty of circus weird clubhouse things already. I think adding this would add another unstable element that we can't really predict for a team that, again, Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis were fighting not too long ago. You know what I mean? Like that's where we are. So I don't think it makes sense for the Padres. I can't speak for the rest of Major League Baseball, but those are my thoughts on the matter. If this becomes more of a rumor, we'll discuss it again, but I don't want to dedicate a whole episode to it because, quite frankly, I don't want to get attacked online all that much because that tends to be what happens when you bring up Trevor Bauer. So we'll see. We'll see, ladies and gentlemen. And if you get mad, feel free to leave comments below because you might be featured in next week's Padres news update. We're going to continue this going on, reviewing all the news, probably starting on like Thursdays. Like the Thursday News Forward. We'll go over it on Monday and read some of your YouTube comments or Twitter DMs. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres. Tweet at me. Comment. Whatever you want to do, and you might be featured on this whole segment. That's what we're going to be doing once a week on Monday from now on. In terms of the future of this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, don't worry. We're still cooking. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still cooking, folks. We've got plenty of ideas, including going over some of the Padres players of the past that they've been rumored to sign, going over the Padres outfield situation, maybe have a little bit of fun with next year's free agency class, maybe go over some of the worst case scenarios for the Padres, and I might even have a special guest on to talk about some of the most hated Padres from our fan base, by our fan base over the last few years. Lots of ideas, ladies and gentlemen. We don't stop, and neither should you. Until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.